Carbon hydrogen plays a very important role for creating these organic molecules, and organic chemistry is really a study of compounds with carbon, right? Everything, whether it be carbs, whether it be lipids, whether it be proteins or nucleic acids, are all built from this versatile carbon molecule that has 4 valence electrons that can form up to potentially 4 covalent bonds. And it is extremely accessible. It combines easily as a backbone to form long chains of polymers in our body, and it can also form rings. Right? So you're going to see that everything is built from a carbon backbone. Okay, so this is just an example of ethane and ethylene. Right? These are all built from a carbon backbone, and you can see you can have a single bond versus a double bond, but carbon is the versatile center core of all organic compounds. So hydrocarbon structures are also important. Some of them will create these kinks, and some of them will create backbones that form what they call reactive group. So we have amino acids that have the core center of carbon. We have an amine group, and then we have a carboxylic acid group. But what makes each of these 20 amino acids different is the functional groups that provides either a charge, maybe a preference for hydrophobicity, and it's not interacting with water, or maybe it's really small, or maybe it's aromatic, but number of these functional groups provide chemical properties that allow it to behave a certain way. Right? So for example, you may have seen that some of us have curly hair, or hair that tends to be a little bit more wavy. But that's because the proteins in the keratin have a little bit more sulfide bonds, and that sulfide links together. So it creates that wavy and curly texture to some people's hair. Some people don't have that, and so your hair tends to be a little bit more straight. Here is a picture of hexane, cyclohexane, benzene. So these are just all examples of carbon backbone. You can see they form rings. They can form 6 rings, they can form 5 rings, but because of the ring shape, they can interact with cells and membranes and receptors a little bit differently. Okay, you will not need to know how to draw them. You will not need to know how to count electrons, all that stuff. That's for chemistry, but just know that we have hydrocarbon structures, especially for lipids. A lot of the naturally occurring cholesterol derivatives that you hear about, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, pregnenolone, cortisol, a lot of these hormones that are extremely powerful and they're steroid based, they're all built from the same cholesterol hydrocarbon sources. Here are some examples of functional groups you may see, and these examples are highlighted in yellow. So for example, a carbonyl group is a CO, hydroxyl group, making something alcohol, has an OH group. This one is the one I talked about earlier, called the sulfohydryl group, with the S, a sulfur, and H. This is an example of when you have this on amino acids, they could link together and form a sulfide bond. And that's the foundation for curly hair. When you look at wavy curly hair, it's because of that sulfide bond binding together. And then on the bottom, you have phosphate, which is very commonly found in ATP. It's a very unstable bond, and therefore phosphates in molecular biology and physiology are used as a switch to enable a reaction to turn on. Okay, so whenever you see a phosphate, this is like the universal flicking a switch up into the on or switch on mode, where you allow a reaction to take place.